Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. My good friend, Kevin Wells, author and speaker, is here today to talk about a subject that is just so important to both of us. It has become something that has stolen my heart. Kevin Wells is the author of several books, lots of articles, but the one that I think about is Priest and Beggar, The Heroic Life of Venerable Aloysius Schwartz. Venerable Aloysius Schwartz was the founder of the World Villages, and you're going to correct anything I mess up on. And we're going to talk about why what that has to do with something that has just enraptured many of us today. I have been obsessed with the Sound of Freedom movie. I have been watching every Tim Ballard video. I have been watching videos from OUR. I have been listening to Jim Caviezel. What they tried to do worked. These children that are being sex trafficked, tiny children, infants, babies. I hope all of you have seen that movie. And if you haven't, you need to get into that theater and you need to watch it at least once. But I want you to, and some of the things I say, people like you say things that none of us would say, but they're not just talking about sex trafficked teenagers or even 5-year-olds. Some of them are infants that are birthed so they can be raped. So what is the connection? The connection to my fantastic guest today, Kevin Wells, is the public relations guy. That's not really formal, right, Kevin, calling you guy. For World Villages. He has been there many, many times. World Villages has saved thousands. I think the number is about 21,000 children from 6 countries. And many of those are children who, like in the movie The Sound of Freedom, have been sexually or sex trafficked and rescued. So it's Paul Harvey. Now you want the rest of the story? This is kind of where we are today. What happens to these kids after they're rescued? So I've just given you a whole mouthful, Kevin. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being such a prolific writer, but more so, thank you for going into these places where the least of these are found and doing everything you can with your pen and your voice to get them the help they need.
Well, Christine, thank you for the wonderful introduction there. I think PR guy is just fine. Call me a guy. It's all good.
I'm from Milwaukee. It's what we say.
I know. I am a guy. So no, Christine, I'm aligned with you. We're symmetrically aligned. The greatest unspoken evil in the world today, it's not abortion, because abortion is spoken of, is child trafficking. And by the grace of God, I don't know how, but I've been led through the writing of the biography of Venerable Aloysius Schwartz, Priest and Beggar. I was led into a stunning portrayal of raw heroism. These Sisters of Mary travel twice a year into the most dangerous towns, villages, climb up mountains, etc., in the world as preemptive workers to save these children from being trafficked and the violence of poverty, where many have already been pimped out to neighborhoods, have been sexually abused by so-called men, stepfathers, uncles living in the house. It is diabolical. So I know the stories because, as you mentioned, Christine, I've spent, I guess, collaboratively 2 or 3 months down there with these children, these graduates, these heroes, the Sisters of Mary. I don't know if there is, and if anyone does know, please tell me or let Christine know. I don't know if there's a larger group of sisters in the world or anyone in the world. There's 381 of them who work harder as preemptive workers to save the trafficked than the Sisters of Mary. So all I'm trying to do, Christine, is tell their story and get folks out there to realize it's not just Tim Ballard played by Jim Caviezel. There's these little women, these little heroes.
Teeny tiny ladies.
They've been held up at gunpoint. I know this. I've talked to them. They've been kidnapped. They've been physically assaulted. They do not care about risking their lives. They don't care about dying because they're in a state of grace, hopefully. They don't care because God has compelled them through Father Al Schwartz, their founder, to go to these evil villages to take these kids down these mountains, etc., and bring them into these humble kingdoms of resurrection, which are these boys' towns and girls' towns.
I've recently read several articles that you wrote, and again, you're very good at painting the picture. And so when I read about the Sisters of Mary, my mind saw, as you were painting this picture, them going through some of the darkness that we saw in the movie Sound of Freedom, in the places where the police won't go and the National Guard won't go. I mean, they just leave it. They've just surrendered it to these filthy, filthy people. And you wrote about how these trafficked children would see in the middle of the night the face of this little nun in the window, and how she would say, and maybe I have the wrong words, but basically she'd communicate, "I'm here to help you. Do you want to come? Do you want to be rescued?" And, I think about this because these kids have not had anyone to trust, right? They couldn't even trust their parents because they sold them accidentally or intentionally. Then every single human that touched them, from the groomer to the perpetrators, have also been untrustworthy. So now all you've got this little face of a little nun in a window. And I think you made me see how they see Mary. And I know it's supernatural. I know that God allows them to see the light. And these 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 12-year-olds, I just know that they can trust these ladies. So this is just it's so much bigger than we can talk about in a 1-hour show here. But the courage of these women, you sent me a picture, they're like 5'1", all of them, and Tim Ballard's this big muscular guy. I mean, okay, we can at least get an idea, but these little tiny ladies go in with nothing but the grace of God and their courage, and they face these children and say, "Do you want to be rescued?" And the kids go with them. I mean, talk about that. Kind of paint in all the gaps that I didn't, because when you showed me that, I was like, that is only the power of God that allows those transactions to happen. And then later we'll talk about the awesome things they're doing to heal them.
Very good. So let's scrape the surface here. So I could speak about Tanzania and how the sisters will go to bring in the girls who are being generally mutilated. So I can go to the different countries. They're in 6 different countries, but we'll just stick with Mexico for the sake of this one podcast. So the sisters have identified the most dangerous states. They are Guerrero, Oaxaca, Veracruz, Chiapas, and really outside Mexico City. So what they do, they go to the places where the violence is at its strongest for children. And twice a year, they take what are called recruitment trips. And what a recruitment trip is, it sounds very vanilla and generic, but what it really is, it's a time where the sisters put their lives in jeopardy, because we'll just take Guerrero, for instance. So Guerrero is the most dangerous state in Mexico. Why? Because it is mountainous and it's by the sea. And that's where the traffickers camp out, because they know the hiding places in the mountains. They know where to go. It's almost like the moonshiners in West Virginia. Right. They know the hollers. So that's where the traffickers go. So the sisters will take an about 11 or 12-hour bus ride, a little rickety bus. I shouldn't say little, because it'll seat about 30 people, but it's an old bus. And they'll drive out to Guerrero. They'll travel potholed roads, these just terrible conditions, to get to the spot, to get to the area, to these villages where they know the children are looking for them, are looking for rescue, for instance. So what they'll do is they'll climb these mountains 2 by 2. So sisters will go to different mountains or different areas of Guerrero, and they will 2 by 2 walk up mountains bathed in human monsters. There are MS-13 gang members. There are murderers. There are rapists, and there are human traffickers. They walk right through them. They know they're there. The sisters know they're there, and the bad guys know the sisters are walking up their hill. And they know why they're walking up the hill: to take their merchandise, to take their property, the young girls, the young 9 and 10-year-old girls. As I mentioned earlier, the sisters simply don't care. Again, they're in the state of grace. If they die, they die. So what'll happen is they'll get to that first village, and because they go there every year, the townsfolk know the weekends that the sisters are coming. So they'll many of the mothers, oftentimes there's not fathers in the homes, but many of the mothers will know the sisters are coming. So they'll swing their doors open for these sisters. And the sister will go back into this room that's like a closed casket, an airless closed casket. It's just dark. You know, it's pretty stark stuff. They're lean-tos. They're dark homes.
Yeah.
The sister will go in, and it's almost like when they go into the bedroom, it's like the sister will be opening up the lid of a casket, and they'll look down into the eyes of a child, and they'll say, "It's time." And the child will look up and they'll say, "Sister, I can't." And no, your mother has been praying for us to come up this mountain. It is good. It is good. Sister, I can't, because if I leave, they might kill me. They might take out my mother. And sister, they might take you down too. No, sweetie, no. God has put us before you today. Your mother has had her prayers answered. It is time for you to come with us. And the poor little girl or the poor little boy will look to their mom, who's weeping at this point or shedding tears, and they'll say, "Mom, is it okay?" And mom will say, "It is." So the little girl or little boy will get out of the casket, and sister will grab her hand, and they'll walk back down this mountain after the goodbyes. And they pass the drug runners and the human traffickers at MS-13, and they get in a bus, and they take the long bus ride back to Chalco, Mexico, which is outside of Mexico City, about an hour outside of Mexico City, where 3,000 girls live in these humble kingdoms of resurrection, of true Catholic, authentic living, where they're healed. Same thing with the boys who go to Guadalajara, where today there's 2,300 boys in Guadalajara, same situation, where sisters heal them. They mother these boys and girls back to health. And we'll get into it later, Christine, but they send these kids out 5 years later. They're educated for 5 years. They send them out, and this story needs to be known.
And they do the rescuing.
They send them out as Catholic missionaries. So it's not only do they save these girls, but they teach them, and boys, they teach them how to prevent future girls and boys from being trafficked. Like, it's not like teaching them how to fish, to bring them in. Hey, no, you go back out and you save your communities. And they go back out and they end up becoming mechanics, lawyers, doctors, someone who's fixing your shoes, farmers. Some become priests, some become
productive citizens of this world and of the kingdom.
Yeah. And they're that, Christine, but they're this, which is even better. They're that, of course, which is exceptional. But the sisters are like, no, of course you go back out as productive citizens, but I send you out amongst the wolves. You have been brought back to life. They don't say this, but the sisters have died to themselves so the children can live. So they've been saved, mother back. So they go out, and Christine, I'm going to mark my words. You don't have to, but I'm going to say it.
I got a pen right here. I'm ready.
Write it down. I want you to tattoo it to your arm. So I believe these kids, they graduate throughout these 6 different countries throughout the world between 2,000 and 3,500 every year. They're going out into this world, to universities, to workplaces, back into their hometowns as the greatest Catholic missionaries today. Why? Because they're fearless, because the sisters raised them from the dead like they were Lazarus. And the sisters say, you are now obliged to show people the face of God. You tell your story, and you tell them you were sacramentalized by the holy hour, the daily mass, the nightly rosary at 7 o'clock, all the love you've been given. You go out into the world and you bring them into the truth of the Catholic faith. You spread the gospel, and they do it, and they have no fear because they saw the sisters have no fear. They saw the sisters go out bold. Well, they go out bold 5 years later. So I think it's the greatest story in the world, and I wish more people knew about it. Because do you know many bishops that are missionaries like these kids? Do you know many priests that are missionaries? I don't. I mean, I know there's a few out there, I guess, but these kids go out 3,500 strong.
And they not only were the victims, then they overcame the victimization, and now they're going back into the darkness as light and courageous and strong. And, I want to I had a question in my head. So I want to clarify what you said about them going and the mother will get the kid out of like this casket room. Now, my vision, so clarify, was kids were stolen from their families into these sex trafficking or other situations. So how did the mom have access to her child? Was the child being trafficked out of the mom's house and the mom knew it but couldn't stop it? That's what I don't understand. I was picturing the mom's praying, her kid's someplace else, she doesn't know where. So can you clarify?
So yeah, so I'll explain it as best I can. So here's the situation in these towns and in villages. Many of these children, I'll just say it, we're on a podcast where we can speak pretty bluntly about things. Mm-hmm. Between 60 and 70% of these children that are brought into Girls Town have been sexually abused by evil men. By the neighborhood. Some have been pimped out just to feed the family. It's diabolical poverty. Like we often think of poverty as threadbare clothing, no food, a lean-to living in. No, it's diabolical, because when you don't have anything, like people will say, I'm sorry, little sidebar here. People will say, and it's such a cheesy line, oh, but the poor have faith in God. You gotta love the poor. No. Everything goes against the poor, because the poor have very little. The poor wonder about where the next meal is. So they look at God and like, God, where are you? Where are you? My uncle just put me on the street with his friend to earn money. Where are you, God? So it's a fight for the poor to love God, to still have faith in God, because they have been abused in diabolical ways. The sisters are preemptive workers in the trafficking, because many of the girls they cannot get to are trafficked. So the girls they do get to are on the verge. So I've interviewed quite a few girls down there who have avoided traffickers. They've escaped trafficking. They've gone to other villages to escape the local trafficker. The sisters will hear about this and they'll find the girl that's already been hurt in ways that you and I understand. Evil men hurt girls, and they'll find the girl and bring them to Girls Town before the trafficking takes place. So really what they are is preemptive workers in the trafficking for girls who have already been hurt very badly by men.
So these moms know it and they love their children, but they know that to let them get out of there and get into the orphanages will actually protect their child.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wasn't following, because of course, I see the movie and I see the children stolen and they're in some tucked away village where it's protected by the bad guys and, to get in there. But, I just think of that relationship of trust. I mean, we're going to talk about the world villages, the Sisters of Mary. They'll get food, they'll get shelter, they'll get some uniforms, they'll have classmates. But you and I know, unless you have a deep trust unless there's some human that you can just say, I'm safe with. To feel safe is huge, because once I feel safe, then my potential is open. So can you speak at all about the process that these sisters work with the kids to earn their trust? I know there's a lot of adoration you talked about and exposure to the sacraments, but tell us what you know about the process of earning their trust, making them feel safe before we can get them out into the world.
Well, the kids come in with clenched fists, right? They come in with clenched fists because here's what they're doing for the first 11 years of their life. Don't come after me. Don't come after me. So the sisters need to take those clenched fists and sort of bend it into this, right? And that takes some time. So when the kids first come in, I'll be blunt, some are animalistic. They do not trust the love of a sister. The Sisters of Mary, Christine, I want to tell you, the Sisters of Mary are one of the only orders in the world that have taken 5 vows. So one of those vows is, obviously we have poverty. One of them is they pray 3 hours every day. So they have a vow of praying 3 hours every day, because they know that without devotion to God through prayer, they can't do this work, because it is ugly, gruesome work to take a poor kid who has wounds the size of blue whales, Leviathan wounds, memories, waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to sleep, screaming. These are the type of kids they get. So the sisters die to themselves, and they wake up each morning at 5, begin the day with a holy hour, then they go to mass. And right around the time these kids' eyes begin to open, the sisters are in their rooms. So the way it works, Christine, it might be interesting to your viewers. So there's over 3,000 kids in Girls Town in Chalco, Mexico, and there's 55 sisters. So they break down the kids into families, because a mother has one family. So there'll be 40 kids in this family. They're named after saints, Saint Teresa, so they all have saint names. So when the kids wake up in the morning, the sister's already done a holy hour, the sister's already been to mass. So sister is there making them breakfast, kind of checking their nails, just like a mom does. It's just like you did for your children. They're helping them dress. Oh, your shoes look good. Oh, your hair's a little messed up here. Let me comb it for you. So the sisters feel the love of a mother. Then they're brought off into class for the rest of the day. Because again, this is accredited high school classes. They go off to universities. They get scholarships. There's no earbuds. There's no cell phones. There's no social media. There's no videos. So the kids are smart because they can core drill down into studies, catechism, sports, music, whatever they like. So they get out they get out on fire because they're actually, there's no distractions. So back to the original point. So when they come in as little kids, as freshmen, so-called freshmen, the sisters have a lot of work getting into the wound. So it's like they have a scalpel, and they dig and they dig and they dig and they dig until finally they can get the poor little girl or poor little boy to say, this is the day it happened, and this is when this is how it kept being perpetuated. And sister, you can't do anything for me, because in a sense they say, I'm Mary Magdalene, I'm a prostitute, and sister must work hard along with the work of former chaplain Father Dan Leary to say, no, put your sign down. You are not a prostitute. You are a princess of God. You are a virgin. No, sister, you don't understand. This is what my stepfather did to me. This is the house that I lived in where men kept coming in. I am Mary Magdalene. Put your sign down. Listen to me. I am your mother now. I just combed your hair. I just fed you breakfast. I love you more than anyone outside of your own mother and Jesus Christ. I'm here to lead you to the reality that you cannot live with this wound. Because if you live with this wound, you will not make it in life. So that's why I say they have a scalpel, and they dig and they carve and they dig, and when they finally get to the point where the kid coughs it up and says, sister, do you mean to tell me that none of this is my fault, or it's not my fault? I'm not only telling you, I'm saying God wants me to tell you. Will you walk with us now? Will you walk with God now? Sister, can I? Can I, sister? Yeah, come on, let's go. We got a whole life to live. So that's what these sisters do worldwide, every day, 365 throughout the world.
I think this has to be part of it. There's this, I do it with my standers. I have the new people come in, they're shell shocked because their spouse just left them, and so we call them our newbies. And then you have the veterans. They're still standing, but they're helping those out of that. And so I would see there's the same type of what am I looking for? Status structure in place naturally in world missions with the sisters, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but an older child who's been with the sisters for 2, 3, 4 years, who's been healed, we carry our wounds, but they're healed, can then lean on the younger, or the newbie can lean on this older child. Have you seen that? Like you said, they develop these families, and so the older ones are maybe protected, or when I say older, the veterans that have been in there protect the new ones coming in. And what have you seen in terms of like this family structure? I mean, you've got to have seen so much because you've been with them so much time.
So you're pretty sharp, Christine. That's exactly
for a blonde. It's impressive, I know.
Oh man. So that's exactly what happens. The sisters, knowing, especially the children that have overcome the most trauma, the most abuse, the ones that have really come along and realized, once they become sort of sanctified by truth about that it really wasn't their fault, they couple the more traumatized ones with sort of the 3rd or 4th year students and say, hey, we need you to give your own experience. tell your story, and tell the little girl how bad it was for you too, and you can relate. But here's what you learned about yourself, about God's love for you. So it's almost like, so as you know, Christine, I used to be a baseball writer. So I've covered a baseball team with Wade Boggs. So a manager would have some of the younger players just up from the minor leagues to get together with a great hitter in Wade Boggs just for tips. Wade Boggs would say, hey, look, here's some things I learned along the way. It's the same thing. It's just sort of you could say a mentorship program, but that's too trite. But yeah, they try and put girls with other girls or boys with other boys just to learn from them.
You've talked to the kids individually as well. Yes.
Many.
Tell me a story of a child who just touched you and empowered you to keep doing what you do.
Oh my gosh, I have dozens and dozens and dozens.
Give me 2 or 3.
Okay, well, the first girl I've ever spoke to at Girls Town in Chalco, her name was Zyra. So what happened, Christine, it was, you'll find this interesting. So during, right when crazy COVID started in 2020, I'd signed a contract to write a book on Venerable Aloysius Schwartz. And I knew that, and again, Father Al was the founder of the Sisters of Mary in post-war Korea. He's an American priest. He's a paragon. I asked you, please, I beg your viewers to read Priest and Beggar to see a story of an American hero like Jackie Robinson or Abraham Lincoln. He's a priest, but this guy's like George Washington.
And he's going to be a saint, hopefully.
Oh, he is. He's on his path to canonization. Yeah. I think it's going to happen very soon. So I knew that there were sisters that took care of Father Al as he died of Lou Gehrig's disease in 1989. So I had to get down to Chalco to interview them and you couldn't get on. This is back when people were crazy. This was in May of 2020. You couldn't go anywhere without, there was no
shrink wrapping your body and putting a hazmat suit on, right?
Yeah, you had to be an astronaut. Yeah, and back then they had Q-tips. So Christine, this is funny. So finally the Sisters of Mary said, okay, we'll let this crazy guy Wells come in to write this book because they love Father Al. They don't know anything about me, but they let me in and they let me stay for a month. But I couldn't leave because of COVID craziness. But to let me in there, they said, but you must get tested. And I didn't get the shot, and I don't believe in any of that, but that's neither here nor there.
Different podcast.
So they took a Q-tip. Back then, this is when Q-tips were the size of telephone poles.
Baseball bats, right? Yeah.
And they not only it wasn't like a little dab, it was up in my brain for like 7 minutes.
That's right.
And then they went to the next one. And I was just screaming like in pain, like Father Al, save me, Father Al, save me. So it came back negative. So they stuck me. So they opened up the gates of Girls Town and I was in. So I'm like, thank God. I'll never forget the plane ride. There was like 2 people from BWI in Maryland to Mexico because nobody was flying. So I got in, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a humble kingdom of resurrection. All I saw were girls. I can't, it's like talking about the Grand Canyon. You really can't explain it unless you're there. Right away, I saw girls bathed in radiant joy, like joy that doesn't make sense to Americans because it's teenagers that don't have their, not looking into the palm with a cell phone. There's no earbuds, there's nothing. It's just joy. So here's what happened. So I went up to Sister Margie, who ran the whole place, and she said, and she took care of Father Al as he was dying of Lou Gehrig's disease. And I said, let's sit down and talk about Father Al. She said, Kevin, if you want to talk about Father Al and know his life, show up tomorrow at 9 a.m. and we'll begin. So I'm a biographer. I'm like, good, sister, that's great. Let me throw my bag in the room and we'll get going tomorrow. So the next day, I show up at 9 o'clock. It's a beautiful May day, and there's 12 girls lined up, and they have blue skirts on and white blouses, and they're smiling, they're happy, and I went up to sister and I said, oh, hey, sister, you ready? And she said, yeah, but before you get to know Father Al, I want you to talk to these 12 girls. So I spent the next 3 hours getting to know these 12 beautiful girls, right? And one by one, I began to see them as 12 broken apostles. The first girl I spoke to was Zyra, and Zyra said, told me she was about 12 years old, brand new student, that she was chased an hour up a hill by a human trafficker. But because she lived on the mountain, this mountain, she knew where the hiding spots were, and she would go down every day for school. So she knew the mountain very well, and she'd go back up at the end of the day. So this town in Guerrero was known for trafficking. So she knew the traffickers, but this one day, this trafficker spotted her and it was a young trafficker. So in shape, chased her up the hill. She got away from him. But here's the story of these kids. So she went back to her home. She didn't have a mom or dad. She was staying with her grandfather. Her grandfather was an alcoholic. So there was fights in the home. I think grandfather lived with another woman, and they were fighting because he was a drinker, and there was the violence was physical, it was emotional, it was spiritual, it was an oppression. And she told me, she said, Kevin, I made it a habit to pray in front of this little statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe and ask Mary to take it all away. The danger of trafficking, granddad's alcoholism, the darkness of the home. This is the type of home that the sisters walk into. This is the type of home. So they took Zyra and they said, Zyra, you ready? Zyra said, yeah, I'm ready. The next girl who came up, Antonina, she told me, Kevin, I saw my dad get shot dead in the street. He wouldn't do something that the gangs, when you live in these villages, you have to pay a tithe to the mafia. If you don't share your corn or your apples or whatever, not apples, but whatever it might be, beans with the mafia, then they will take you out or take your family out. Well, I guess this father was late on payment or whatever it was. I forget exactly, but he was shot dead in the street in front of his 12-year-old daughter. Mom, she was burned to death. These are the type of homes that the sisters climb these mountains to get. So these are these stories. So this story might sound to the American ear
far-fetched or rare, right? But they're every day there.
Yeah, these stories are these stories of these boys and girls. So it's just it's like a never-ending kaleidoscope of pain, bad memories, and devastation that the sisters grab onto, and they work to heal.
I just think Tim Ballard has said, like I said, I've been a junkie on his videos lately. Every time he saw a porn video or he said it burned little holes in his head, and he talked about his PTSD and he had to get healed from it, and he said he waited too long. And then Jim Caviezel also talked about it, and he just, the anger, how you process what you see. Now, I know you're not physically watching the sex trafficking yourself, but how does it strike you when you see the even to the degree that you see it, the diabolical darkness when you are with, how do you think those sisters, so first question is how does that affect you? And then with the sisters, how do they keep from being angry or ugly or captured by it? Do you have those answers?
Yeah, I do. Well, the second answer is I'll answer first. So the sisters, as I mentioned earlier, they pray 3 hours a day, because if they didn't, they couldn't handle
What they see,
the type of work they do.
Yeah.
So Christine, you might find this interesting. When Father Al began his ministry in 1957, it was post-war Korea, and back then orphans were in the streets, sort of leftover war shrapnel or leftover landmines, and women were sleeping under bridges, impregnated by American soldiers or European soldiers after the war, outcasts from society. Lepers, get this, lepers were in the streets rubbing their diseased limbs off people to steal their money. So Father Al sees all this colossal devastation. Tuberculosis. So the tubercular lived on these, in the southern peninsula of Korea, they lived on these mountains where they would just go to die. There was thousands, because TB was the big thing. And you wouldn't get near these mountains because that's where disease was. Right. So Father Al in 57 gets off a train on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception and says, Mary, thank you. He kind of smelled in the human waste and the disease and the dead animals. And he said, Mary, thank you for the incense of my new home. I prayed for the violence of your son on the cross, and now it embraces me fiercely. Mary, now put me to work. This is my new home. You just rolled out the red carpet. Within 15 years, all of South Korea has changed, all of it, because this one American priest who didn't know the language, who didn't know anything, stuck his nose into the grind, and he changed it all. He built boys' towns and girls' towns, 7-story high hospitals, 9 or 10 hospices, leprosarium, tuberculariums. And then he did it in the Philippines, and then he did it in Mexico City. So why I say this is, I think as Catholics today, we need to be like the sisters. So when Father Al died in 92 of ALS, really, in Mexico City, it was no longer lepers in the streets. It wasn't impregnated, women under bridges. The new thing they saw was the violence of poverty. Even back then was the undercurrents of trafficking. More to a point, it was sexual abuse of these poor boys and girls. So that even back then in 92, 93, 94, when they took the baton after Father Al died, he was their spiritual father. When they talk about him, they cry, they love him so much. I mean, they look at Father Al like he's Jesus on the cross. He's just a holy, bold, strong man. The sisters adore him. He is their father. So they want to sort of resemble Father Al with their courage. And that's why they climb these mountains. They don't care. Like if it wasn't human trafficking, let's just say it was something else, the sisters would pivot. They would pivot to whatever it is. So they're just responding to the urgency of today. Now, as far as me, my job's easy. All I do, so I'm going to go on a recruiting trip in Tanzania in the fall. And I'm going to see some things that are pretty raw and ugly as well, but in a different way. But what all I see, Christine, for the most part, I've been into the barrios, into the slums, and I've seen some of the families that have been saved.
Decimated.
But all I see mostly is resurrection. I see the radiance of girls and boys who have been healed in Guadalajara Boys Town, Chalco Girls Town, and I see kids that now know that this monstrous wound can be plucked out by God through the sisters, and they're reborn again. So I'm the luckiest guy on the face of the earth, because I can look at myself and my family and whoever else and say, anything can be conquered. Anything can be conquered in life. If these girls and boys have overcome this, then what I have is chicken scratch. So I'm a lucky guy. I just see grace.
You keep in touch with Zyra?
Actually, a great question. She's in her 3rd year, and so it's the tough thing, Christine, is I have a lot of little friends down there, a lot of little boys that are friends. They're 15, 16, 17, and girls. But when I see Zyra, she'll come up to me and give me a hug, and she'll run off. But I know a lot of girls down there, so it's not just Zyra; it's many others. But that's a good question.
What do you want most for my viewers to do? One thing.
I want your viewers, if they were pierced or if they were impacted by Sound of Freedom, I want them to give. I want them to share some of their tithe with the Sisters of Mary. It takes a lot of money to take care of 20,000 children. 20,000 bowls of cornflakes were poured this morning for these kids. There's going to be a lot of grilled cheese going on right now. Tonight, there's going to be dinners for 20,000. Not only do they need to be taken care of, and food, clothing, shoes, the whole thing, teachers, insurances, but these sisters are saviors. So I would encourage your viewers to go into worldvillages.org/poverty, worldvillages.org/poverty. And I'm pleading now. Father Al's dead. The sisters are too busy. So I'm just a guy who's seen it, and it's real. Trust me, it's real. This is no shuck and jive. What the sisters do is deadly serious. And it's not only saving kids, it is saving our Catholic Church. Because remember, they're sending these kids out as missionaries. They're disciples. These kids are apostles. And they back down. They don't care about woke agendas. They don't care if their college roommate makes fun of them because of their rosary in the corner of the room, or their little picture of Father Al, or Our Lady Virgin of the Poor, or Lady Guadalupe. They might get mocked and ostracized by the college roommate, but I'll say this, and I've heard it so many times, Christine. 4, 5, 6 months later into that freshman year in college, that roommate will come up and say, you know what, I judged you, but I see the light in your eyes and I want what you have because I've never had it. Or I had it, but I mocked it. And I thought that's what my great grandma was supposed to do, is pray the rosary. But I see how people come to you, and I see something in you that is soft and peaceful. I see something. Can you teach me what you knew? And of course, what does the kid do? Oh, of course. Let's go talk. So for so many reasons, I encourage a viewer, worldvillages.org/poverty.
One last question. Vocations. These kids are experiencing God. What are we doing? Because we have a deficit going on here of vocations. What's going on there?
Building vocations. So this is very interesting. 85 to 90% of the Sisters of Mary, and I think there's 382 today worldwide, 85, 90% are graduates of the Sisters of Mary. They see what these heroes did for them for 5 years, and they say, I want that. I want in. So they form these kids to become sisters. Father Dan Leary is forming the boys because there was no chaplain since Father Al died in 92. No chaplain has stepped in till Father Dan. So now Father Dan is getting into the boys' towns all over the world, Honduras, Guatemala, Brazil, Mexico, and he's forming the boys to become priests. So now boys are considering seminary and becoming priests. So yeah, they're building rebuilding the church that way as well.
I just did a video short yesterday on, I had a lot of people, you've heard people, it's like, why does God allow cancer? Why does God allow this? God isn't good if he's allowing this death or this rape or this whatever. And then I say the video was about God's perfect versus his permissive will. God's perfect will. He doesn't want anyone hurting or grieving or raped or dead or cancer or amputated leg. But in God's permissive will, he is so wise. He knows that what Satan means for harm, how he tried to attack these kids and kill them and rape them and destroy them. God is making priests and sisters out of them and just he wins every time. So I do always like to encourage anybody that's watching, if you are struggling, if you think that God isn't watching, God is watching, and God wants you to remember that he loves you, to know that nothing is for naught. He wants to heal you, but then he wants to use you to go out and do greater things, the things you're born to do. So any last words from you, Kevin? I always ask the same question, but you kind of answered it already. Name one thing you'd have our listeners do differently as a result of something they heard today. So if you didn't already answer that now, or give last words.
Yeah, I would. So I think we'll switch gears a little bit, but it's really on the same topic. I think one of the startling issues we have in the church today is a lack of heroism and courage from our hierarchy. And the study and the research and the reading that I did on Venerable Aloysius Schwartz points to precisely what the church begs for today. This was a priest who was attacked by American bishops, attacked by his Korean bishop, attacked by mafia kingpins because he raised a lot of money, attacked by fellow priests, attacked. But all he really paid attention to was, Mary, what would you have me do? I'm your slave. You tell me. And he could not be beaten. Bishop Strickland had an apostolic visitation last month in Tyler, Texas. Father Al had 6. He never lost. Why? Because in that investigation, the investigator understood this man is a saint. They're trying to get rid of him because he is mocking whoever the local bishop was at the time by his level of sanctity and level of his work. I would encourage your listeners, please, to read my biography. I'll be in my little microscopic soapbox here, called Priest and Beggar, The Heroic Life of Venerable Aloysius Schwartz. It did become, so Ignatius Press published it, and it sold well, and it's still selling well. Why? Because it's a story of absolute heroism. I mean, it's a story that is remarkable what one man can do to save. So a priest is ordained to save souls. This man, Father Al, saved generations of souls. Why? Because he never stopped. He did not care if he died. Mary told him to go to the poorest of the poor, and that's what he did. Now, all these years later, look who's doing it. His spiritual heirlooms, the Sisters of Mary.
Gosh, that's wonderful. Well, I am grateful that you've brought this topic to us. I am just God's timing, bringing out the movie. We see all these other organizations. Please give. Please give. If you don't have the courage, I mean, I don't get into, if God called me, I would, but we don't all have the courage of these men and women, these sisters of Mary, the Tim Ballards of the world that are going into there physically pulling these kids out. But you can do your part because they do need to be fed. They do need their cornflakes, as you said, and every now and then they need steak. Let's let them know that they weren't forgotten. Let's give them of not just out of our plenty. Let's give them out of our what are the poor woman in the Bible, out of her need? She still gave the 2 small coins. So everybody has 2 small coins, please. But I always get yelled at for talking about the 2 small coins. So I was corrected recently and said, if you're the person that has $100,000 and you need to give it away, World Villages, worldvillages.org. Please feed these children and grow God's kingdom. So,
Thank you, Christine.
Wow, you're doing good work. So keep on getting the word out. What I heard, again, I keep going to the movie because I'm obsessed. But one thing Tim Ballard keeps talking about is what President Lincoln did. Is President Lincoln, when he met not Harriet Tubman, but Harriet Beecher Stowe, right? She's the one that wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Yes.
He met her and he said, so you're the tiny lady with the big story that's changing the world. And Tim Ballard and Jim Caviezel have been talking about, they may do the work, but it's the storytellers that change the world. So thank you for telling the story, because if the story wasn't out there, if the pictures weren't painted, people like me wouldn't know. I never heard of them before you, and nor did many of my viewers. So continue to paint the stories so that everything that's in the dark will be seen in the light, as God promised in the Bible. And I'm grateful to know you, and I'm grateful to know you're doing this work. So I know you'll
Christine,
do it.
you're awesome. You're awesome. Thank you for letting me tell the story. Without you, the story's really not out there. Without Angel Studios getting in there for this movie, it would have never got out there. So we need people like you, Christine. Thank you.
Well, we'll just keep doing it. We're on the same team. So for people to find you, find your writing, where do they go?
I go to kevinwells.org, but I don't matter. I would go to worldvillages.org/poverty. But if they want to find me, it's Kevin Wells.
But they need to find your writings, because your writing isn't superficial. You're writing about real people, about real stories. You're also in Crisis Magazine. And that's where I read these stories as well. So that's crisismagazine.org?
Crisis.org.
Crisis.org. So follow the storyteller, and then you'll find the stories. So Kevin's a fantastic writer who loves the Lord, who would die for Jesus. And if you want to hear some of the stories that you aren't hearing anywhere else, go to crisis.org, go to kevinwells.org, right? Not
Got
com. That part, if one doesn't come up, type the other one in. I'll have a link right here underneath the show in the show notes. And I will also have a link for you to give to World Villages. Want to make sure I don't say that incorrectly. So do that. And again, like and subscribe to all my channels. God's given me great guests. I may not be able to do the work that these people are doing, but I have airtime, and I can make sure I access it to share their stories. So get it out there, like and share, and subscribe to my newsletter, and blah, 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 all that stuff that I'm supposed to say. So we're going to go off the air. Kevin, you're an expert now. I think you know how to do this, right? Okay. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you always to live your life
sunny side up.
Yes.